Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're tackling societal collapse.
Ooh, sounds intense.
It kind of is, right?
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating, too, especially after all those articles you sent me. The
Yeah.
ones on Easter Island and the Maya civilization,
Oh, yeah, those were great.
and that one on ancient Mesopotamian alchemy, even that ties in. We're going to uncover why some societies just thrive
Right.
while others fall apart completely, and what we can learn from both, the successes and the failures.
Absolutely. And you know, what's really interesting is we always think about collapse as this sudden event, like bam, it's over.
Right, like a light switch.
But usually it's way more gradual, unfolding over generations. It's
Okay.
more like watching a time-lapse video of a building being demolished.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, first you see those little cracks appear, then the whole structure starts to weaken, and, well, eventually it all just crumbles.
Well, okay, I'm hooked already.
Good.
But before we get to all the falling debris, let's define what societal collapse actually means.
Good point, because not every downturn or rough patch is a full-blown collapse, right?
Right.
We're talking about a huge decline population, complexity, social organization,
Okay.
and it happens over a large area and a significant period of time.
Gotcha. So it's not just like a bad year or even a decade.
Exactly. It's like this fundamental shift in how a society operates, how it functions.
So basically how it survives or doesn't.
Yeah. And Jared Diamond, in his book Collapse, he uses these two farms as an example.
Okay.
Hull's Farm in Montana, which is doing great today.
Right.
And then there's Gardar Farm over in Norse Greenland, abandoned more than 500 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And they both seem successful at their peak.
So what happened?
Well, only one of them adapted to the changing circumstances.
So I wonder what they were thinking, those Greenland Vikings.
It's true. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, that article you sent about those abandoned Viking settlements, they were such skilled farmers and fishermen back in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
But for some reason, things went south for them in Greenland, literally.
What's crazy is that for the people living through it, decline on that scale must seem almost impossible.
Like inconceivable.
Yeah, imagine living in this thriving city, all this technology around you, and then thinking, this could all disappear. It's a tough concept to grasp.
Especially when we're talking about societies like the Maya,
Oh, right.
with their incredible understanding of astronomy and math.
Yeah.
You'd think they'd be able to, predict and adapt to any challenge.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But even the most advanced societies can be vulnerable to environmental issues.
It's true.
Like in that Maya article, they had these impressive cities and all this knowledge, but it also mentioned how their population was putting a strain on their environment, on the resources.
That makes sense.
And this brings us to a crucial point. Humanity's impact on the environment, it's not new.
Oh, so you're saying it's not just modern industrialization and pollution.
Not at all. Remember that article on ancient Mesopotamian alchemy? Even back then, they were struggling with soil salinization caused by their irrigation practices.
Really? So that's been a problem for a long time.
Yeah, and farmers today still deal with the same issue.
Wow. So we've basically been messing things up for millennia.
Pretty much. Ever since we developed advanced skills, sustainably managing resources has been a challenge.
Okay, so even advanced societies can collapse and environmental challenges have always been a factor.
Right.
But is there some kind of pattern to these collapses? Can we predict when a society is headed for disaster?
Well, Diamond identifies 5 interconnected factors that often contribute to collapse.
Okay, I'm all ears, lamb on me.
And he stresses that it's the combination of these factors, not just one alone, that leads to trouble.
Makes sense.
So first you have environmental damage, like deforestation or soil depletion.
Okay, that's a big one.
Then there's climate change, which can disrupt agriculture and make a region less hospitable.
Right, less food, less people.
And then you've got the relationships with friendly neighbors.
Friendly, as in allies and trade partners.
Exactly, because if those relationships fall apart, the society becomes a lot more vulnerable.
Oh, I see, like a support system.
Yeah, and of course, there's the potential threat from hostile societies.
Right, the good old-fashioned enemies.
Uh-huh. Yeah, could be anything from small-scale raiding to full-on war.
Makes sense.
But the 5th factor, this is the most interesting one.
Okay, you've got me on the edge of my seat.
It's a society's own cultural values.
Wait, really? Cultural values can contribute to a society's collapse?
Absolutely, because values shape how a society perceives and reacts to those environmental challenges.
Oh, interesting.
Sometimes those values can even blind people to the danger or make them resistant to change, even when it's necessary for survival.
Yeah, never thought about it that way.
And think about those massive statues on Easter Island.
Oh, the Moai. Right.
Yeah, they didn't just appear overnight.
No, definitely not.
It took generations of work and resources to create them.
And all while the island was being pushed to its limits. You know, that article on Easter Island didn't explicitly talk about cultural values,
Huh, interesting.
but it did mention the intense competition between those different clans.
Oh, right, yeah.
They were so focused on outdoing each other with bigger, more elaborate statues
Right.
that they didn't seem to notice or maybe even care that they were destroying their own environment.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how cultural values can lead to that environmental damage,
Right.
It's not always a conscious choice to destroy the environment.
So it's more like misplaced priorities.
Yeah, exactly.
Like in the case of Easter Island, their social status was tied to those
The
statues.
answer, the better.
And that blinded them to the long-term consequences.
Sadly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got these 5 factors. Environmental damage, climate change, relationships with friendly neighbors, exposure to hostile societies, and cultural values.
That's right.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
You could say that.
But I'm guessing it's not always a simple straight line from one to the next, right?
No, you're absolutely right.
It's probably way more complicated.
It is. It rarely is that straightforward.
So many moving parts.
These factors can all intertwine and influence each other, in these complex ways,
Yeah.
creating this cascade of consequences that can eventually lead to collapse.
Gotcha.
Maybe we should take a look at some specific historical examples, see how these factors played out.
Okay, I'm game. Where do we start?
Well, we've been talking about Easter Island.
Yeah, those moai are hard to forget.
Right, so let's start there.
Okay, I'm ready to learn about the downfall of those moai-obsessed islanders.
Yay. All right, let's do it.
So those moai, they're like this powerful symbol,
Yeah,
of how a society's values can backfire.
totally.
They wanted status, prestige,
Mm-hmm.
but they ended up, well, they destroyed their own resources.
It's a cautionary tale, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And that question you asked before about predicting collapses.
Yeah.
Easter Island gives us some clues,
Okay, like what?
Deforestation, it played a huge role in their decline.
Right, I remember reading about that.
They cut down almost every tree on the island.
For those moai, right.
Yeah, to move those massive statues.
It's hard to imagine them doing that.
I know, right? But they needed the wood for canoes, for houses, too.
It's crazy to think that something as simple as trees could lead to their downfall.
You'd be surprised how often societies underestimate the importance of, managing resources sustainably.
Yeah, I guess so.
Remember that article about the Anasazi in Chaco Canyon?
Oh, yeah, those guys.
Their story is different from Easter Island, for sure.
But resources played a key role there too, right?
Absolutely. Resource management, or the lack of it, was a big factor in their demise.
Right, the Anasazi, they were dealing with this totally different environment.
Yeah, a harsh landscape.
Super arid, where water was like gold.
Mm-hmm. The most precious resource.
But they also pushed their environment to the limit, didn't they?
Exactly. They developed these really sophisticated irrigation systems
I remember those pictures, yeah.
to support their growing population.
But even their ingenuity couldn't overcome everything, huh?
Well, they had those prolonged droughts,
Right.
and their ecosystem was becoming more and more fragile.
And that's another one of Diamond's points, isn't it?
Yeah.
Climate change, it can make things so much worse.
Absolutely. It amplifies those existing environmental stresses, pushes a society to the brink.
It's incredible they thrived in that environment for over 600 years.
It is a long time.
But eventually, those droughts, the growing population, it was too much.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Why didn't they see it coming? Why not change course?
Right, why wait till it's too late?
This is where those psychological and social factors Diamond talks about become really important.
Okay, so let's dive into that. Why is it so hard for societies to recognize these slow-moving crises?
Well, sometimes the problems are hidden, by fluctuations.
Fluctuations, like what?
Think about those Anasazi droughts.
Okay.
Even during a long, dry period, there would have been years with more rain.
So you could get tricked into thinking it's getting better.
Exactly. It's easy to believe the good times will return, even when the overall trend is going down.
Yeah, that makes sense, wanting to be optimistic.
But what about when the problem's more obvious? Like the deforestation on Easter Island? They had to see those trees disappearing.
Right, like how could they miss that?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But there can be conflicts of interest between individuals and the group as a whole.
Interesting.
Maybe those who benefited most from cutting down the trees, the chiefs, the elites,
Right, the ones in charge.
they were able to ignore or downplay the long-term consequences.
So their short-term gains were more important than the collective good.
Sadly, that's often the case.
It's that tragedy of the commons thing, right? Everyone acting selfishly, and the shared resource gets destroyed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got what Diamond calls rational bad behavior.
Rational bad behavior. What's that?
Individuals, they have no long-term stake in a society, and they make decisions that benefit them personally but harm the community.
Oh, I see.
Like a logging company with a short-term lease on a rainforest, they just want to extract as much timber as possible, as quickly as possible.
And they don't care about the consequences.
Nope. No incentive to invest in sustainable practices because they'll be gone soon.
So it's like they're just stripping the place bare and moving on.
Yeah, sadly, that's happened over and over again throughout history.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get why societies collapse. But what about the opposite? How do we avoid these mistakes?
That's the big question, right?
It is.
The good news is not all societies are doomed.
Oh, thank goodness.
Diamond actually highlights several examples of societies that have not just survived, but thrived.
Okay, give me some hope here.
They faced tough environments, but showed resilience, adaptability.
Who are these success stories? What can we learn from them?
One approach Diamond talks about is bottom-up problem solving.
Bottom up. What does that mean?
Community-based initiatives. Using local knowledge, traditional practices, to manage resources sustainably.
Gotcha. So it's like grassroots sustainability.
Yeah, exactly.
Any examples of that?
The New Guinea Highlanders, they're a great example.
Oh, yeah, that article you sent about their silviculture practices. That was fascinating.
Right. They've figured out how to manage forests, ensure a sustainable wood supply, even in densely populated areas.
It's amazing how effective their methods are.
It is. They plant and manage specific types of trees, ones that grow quickly and don't need much care.
So they're working with their environment, not against it.
Exactly.
Like hyper-local sustainability, based on a deep understanding of their ecosystem.
Totally. But success isn't limited to small communities.
So there are bigger examples, too.
Yeah. Diamond also points to top-down approaches.
Top-down, so the opposite of bottom-up.
Yeah, where governments step in, implement policies, regulations.
To manage resources.
Exactly, to promote sustainability on a larger scale.
Okay, I'm interested to hear about those, which societies have been successful with that.
One example is Tokugawa, Japan.
Japan, huh?
They faced a massive deforestation crisis back in the 17th century.
Really? So this isn't just a modern problem?
Definitely not. It seems like history repeats itself, huh?
Yeah, it does.
So they had this crisis.
What did they do about it? Did they just plant more trees?
Well, they did have huge reforestation programs.
Okay.
But it was more than just planting trees. The Tokugawa shogunate, they took a comprehensive approach.
Like a holistic approach, I guess.
Yeah, strict forest management policies, regulating logging, and timber harvesting.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
And they even introduced measures to control population growth.
Population control, that's a pretty big step.
It was, and not without its critics.
I can imagine.
But they understood that sustainability requires a long-term perspective.
Right, thinking ahead.
And a willingness to make tough choices.
Yeah, I guess so.
They recognized that environmental and social issues are connected.
It's all tied together.
Exactly. And they took bold steps to address both.
And it worked.
The results speak for themselves. They reversed the deforestation, achieved long-term sustainability.
That's amazing, turning things around like that.
It is. It shows that even when facing a huge crisis, things can change.
It gives me hope.
Me too.
But what about today? Are there any modern examples of societies tackling these challenges successfully?
There are. And this is where it gets really interesting because Diamond uses modern Australia as an example.
Australia, really? But Australia seems like it has so much wide open space, unspoiled landscapes.
You're right. Australia has some incredible landscapes.
Yeah.
But underneath the surface, they've got a unique set of environmental challenges.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of challenges?
Soil salinity, it's a major threat to their agriculture.
I didn't know that.
And they've got invasive species causing havoc on their ecosystems.
Invasive species, that's a tough one.
It is, and water management is a constant struggle.
Especially with climate change making those droughts more frequent.
Exactly.
So even a country as big and seemingly resource-rich as Australia has these problems.
Absolutely. It shows that no society is immune to these environmental challenges.
No one gets a free pass.
Nope.
The problems might be different, but the underlying principles are the same.
We're all connected. Our choices have consequences.
Okay, that's a lot to think about. Collapses, successes, ancient civilizations, modern challenges.
It is a lot.
So what's the main takeaway here?
Well, the key takeaway is that we have a choice.
A choice, yeah.
We can learn from the past, choose a different path.
So it's not just about understanding the problems.
No.
It's about understanding the solutions.
Exactly. We need to shift our focus from doom and gloom to action and possibility.
Okay, I feel a little better now, knowing there are ways to, actually succeed, even with these huge challenges.
Yeah.
But how do we change our values? Make better choices? It all feels so overwhelming.
That's a good question.
Yeah, where do we even start?
Well, those examples we talked about, they offer some good insights, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the bottom-up and top-down approaches?
The grassroots and the government stuff?
Exactly.
So which one is better?
It's not about choosing one or the other, really.
Right.
We need both to make real change.
So it's like attacking unsustainability from all sides.
You could say that, yeah.
Like a multi-pronged attack. I like it.
We need individuals making changes in their lives.
Right.
Communities working together on local solutions.
Yeah.
And governments making policies that support long-term sustainability.
Okay, so everyone's got to be involved.
Pretty much.
Like those New Guinea Highlanders.
Oh, yeah. Good example.
They've been managing their forests sustainably for, generations.
Through those community-based practices.
It shows that local knowledge can be really powerful.
It really can.
Makes me think of those articles you sent about community gardens and urban farming initiatives.
Yeah, those are great.
It might seem small, but they're a step in the right direction, right?
Absolutely. Every little bit helps.
And it can inspire others.
That's the idea. Those individual actions can have a ripple effect.
Create momentum for bigger change.
Exactly. If enough people demand sustainable products, businesses will have to adapt.
Makes sense.
And if enough voters prioritize climate change, well, politicians will have to listen.
So we have power as individuals.
You do, yeah.
Through our choices, our voices.
And that brings us back to those top-down approaches.
Oh, yeah, the government stuff.
We need policies that encourage sustainable practices.
Okay.
Regulations for harmful industries.
Right.
Investments in clean technology research.
So stuff that benefits everyone in the long run.
Exactly. Long-term thinking.
Like Tokugawa, Japan.
Yeah, their policies, those forest management and population control measures.
Those were pretty controversial.
They were, but they worked.
Saved them from collapse.
Powerful example of how government action can be effective.
Yeah, but let's be real, getting governments to act on these issues can be tough.
It can be, yeah.
It seems like short-term political gains are always more important than long-term sustainability.
It's a common problem.
It is, for sure.
Yeah. But there's reason to be hopeful, too,
Oh, like what?
There's a growing global movement for climate action.
That's good to hear.
Lots of young people leading the charge.
Yeah, I've seen that.
More and more people recognize the urgency. They're demanding change.
It does feel like things are starting to shift.
And as climate change impacts become more obvious,
Yeah,
that pressure on governments will just keep growing.
hopefully it's enough.
We have to believe it will be.
True.
It's not just about individual countries anymore, though.
Right, what happens in one place affects the whole planet.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Our world is interconnected,
So what you're saying is we can't just focus on our own backyard anymore.
No, we can't.
Because what happens somewhere else?
It can have ripple effects everywhere.
So a societal collapse on some island, it's not just a local tragedy anymore.
Right. In today's world, environmental problems can become global crises.
So if we can't collapse in isolation anymore, does that mean global cooperation is the only way forward?
It's something to think about for sure.
Yeah, it is.
We have to find ways to work together.
Right.
Share knowledge, resources, hold each other accountable.
Otherwise, we're all in trouble.
The challenges are global, so the solutions have to be global too.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
Good. I'm glad.
We've seen how societies can collapse,
Yeah.
but also how they can succeed.
It's a complex topic.
It is, but I feel like I understand it better now.
That's what we were hoping for.
And more importantly, I feel like I can actually be a part of the solution.
That's the most important part.
It is.
By learning from the past, we can make better choices today.
Create a better future.
For everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you learned something.
And that it gave you some food for thought.
Keep exploring these ideas, keep asking questions, and keep taking action.
Yeah, make the world a better place.
Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.